Snow swirled across the quiet Montana street as twins, Anna and Eli, clung to each other on the sidewalk. Their eyes widened in horror. A homeless widow, clothes torn, was being dragged by her hair across the icy road by two burly men. "Let her go!" The twins screamed in unison, their voices sharp and piercing the night. Passers-by froze, but no one dared intervene. The widow's face was pale, lips trembling, and desperation was written in every line of her body. Nearby, a wealthy but solitary rancher, Thomas Grayson, had just returned from tending his cattle. He heard the twins' cries and felt his blood boil. Without thinking, he spurred his horse forward, reaching the scene in seconds. He shouted, "Hey, stop right there!" The men paused, surprised by the sudden presence of someone bigger, stronger, and furious. The widow collapsed onto the snow, but Thomas was already at her side, lifting her protectively into his arms. The twins ran forward, still shouting, "Mama, don't let them hurt you!" Tears streaked down their faces, their tiny fists clenched in fear. Thomas looked at them, nodding reassuringly. "I've got her," he said. "You're safe now." The men tried to argue, but Thomas' voice was steel. "Back off, or you'll regret it." Even in the freezing wind, his authority was undeniable. The widow shivered against him, the weight of hopelessness slowly lifting from her shoulders. Thomas carried her to his horse, draping his coat around her shoulders. The twins climbed beside him, holding tightly to the reins. Snow fell harder, whipping across the valley, but the rancher urged the horse forward. Every step was a struggle through the icy drifts, yet Thomas refused to stop. He whispered to the widow, "You're not alone anymore. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Her lips parted slightly, a fragile hope glimmering in her eyes. By the time they reached Thomas Ranch, the sun had barely risen. Inside the warm wooden cabin, firelight flickered against the walls, casting a soft glow. He laid the widow on a thick blanket, while the twins sat nearby, shivering but safe. Thomas moved quickly, fetching hot water, blankets, and food. The smell of warming soup filled the room. The widow, exhausted and cold, could only whisper, "Thank you," while tears traced lines through the dirt on her face. "Who are you?" Thomas asked gently as he helped her sip warm broth. She swallowed slowly, voice shaking. "I'm Clara. I was left on the streets after my husband died." Thomas nodded, his eyes softening. "You're safe now. No one will harm you here." The twins, still clinging to him, peeked over Clara's shoulder. Their mother's safety had been restored, and for the first time in days, their sobs turned into quiet, shaky relief. That evening, as snow blanketed the ranch, Thomas sat with Clara by the fire. He listened to her story, debts, betrayals, and nights spent shivering with her children in alleyways. Every word cut through him like ice, yet also fueled his resolve. "You don't need to apologize," he said. "I'll take care of all of you. Consider this your new home." Clara's eyes filled with gratitude but also disbelief. How could someone so kind and strong exist in such a harsh world? The twins explored the warm cabin, marveling at the fire, the soft beds, and the smell of bread. Clara smiled faintly, watching them. It had been months since they laughed like this. Thomas guided them in simple chores, feeding the animals, fetching water, sweeping the floor. Slowly the cabin felt alive, infused with hope and new beginnings. Clara allowed herself to rest. Feeling the weight of survival ease from her shoulders, night fell, and Thomas made sure everyone was settled. He tucked the twins under warm blankets and gave Clara a mug of hot tea. "Sleep now," he said gently. "No one will touch you." Clara's eyes filled with tears, finally letting herself relax. The fear that had haunted her for months began to fade. She whispered softly, "I never thought I'd see safety again." Thomas' gaze lingered on her, filled with protectiveness, empathy, and something deeper stirring. The next morning, Thomas prepared a hearty breakfast. Clara watched as the twins ate with joy, their energy returning. She wanted to help, but Thomas insisted she rest. "You've done enough," he said. "Now let me protect you." The sincerity in his eyes silenced her protests. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe in someone else's care, in someone else's strength. in the possibility of a brighter future. Just as Clara began to hope, trouble knocked at the door. A local gang member, responsible for Clara's suffering, arrived with a warning. "She's ours," he snarled. Thomas stepped forward, blocking the door. "Not while I'm here," he said firmly. The twins clutched each other, trembling. Clara hid behind Thomas. For the first time, she felt real safety, knowing someone so fearless had vowed to protect them all, no matter the risk. A tense standoff ensued outside the cabin. Snow fell silently, and the wind seemed to hold its breath. Thomas' stance was unyielding, his presence commanding, his voice cutting through the cold. "Leave now or face the consequences." The gang members hesitated, sensing they had underestimated him. Clara's heart pounded, but she clutched the twins and felt a strange, steady courage growing within her. Thomas was her shield. The gang eventually withdrew, muttering threats. Clara exhaled in relief, hugging her children tightly. We're safe," she whispered. Thomas looked down at the trio, warmth and pride in his eyes. "We are now," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. The cabin, once just walls and a fire, now felt like a true sanctuary. For the first time in months, Clara allowed herself to dream of stability, happiness, and a life rebuilt. That night, Clara tucked the twins in, watching them drift into peaceful sleep. She felt a hand gently on her shoulder. Thomas' eyes met hers. "You don't have to face the world alone anymore," he said. Her lips quivered in a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something else she didn't fully understand yet. In that moment, hope bloomed, a fragile, bright promise of tomorrow. And outside, snow continued to fall softly, hiding the scars of the past beneath a blanket of light. Next morning, Clara awoke to the smell of baking bread. The twins were already awake, giggling as Thomas taught them to feed the chickens. She watched quietly, a small smile forming. The warmth of the cabin, the soft chatter of children, and Thomas' calm presence made her realize, for the first time, she didn't have to fight alone. Every snowflake outside seemed to whisper that they could finally begin again. Suddenly, a loud knock shook the door. Clara froze. The gang was back. The twins clutched her hands, their faces pale. Thomas stepped forward, calm but resolute. "Stay inside," he instructed. Clara peeked from behind the door, fear mixing with awe. Thomas' unwavering stance reminded her that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the will to act despite it. The gang leader barked, "She belongs to us." Thomas didn't flinch. "Wrong answer," he said, voice deep and commanding. "You'll leave or face me and the law." The tension cut through the icy morning air. The twins whimpered, clutching each other. Clara's heart pounded, but she felt a strange calm. Thomas wasn't just protecting them. He was redefining their world with courage and justice. One of the gang members lunged forward. Thomas moved like a shadow, blocking and disarming with precise strength. Snow sprayed around their boots as the skirmish erupted. Clara shielded the twins, her own fear transforming into resolve. She realized that the man who had saved them in the night now carried the power to protect their future. Each strike and move Thomas made reinforced their new sense of safety. Within moments, the gang was disarmed and retreating, muttering threats. Clara exhaled deeply, relief flooding her chest. She embraced her children tightly, feeling warmth she hadn't known in months. Thomas' gaze softened as he watched them. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to imagine a life where nights were not filled with terror, where laughter replaced tears and love replaced despair. Days passed, and the ranch transformed into a sanctuary. Thomas taught the twins to ride horses safely, to care for animals, and even gave Clara a small plot in the garden. Each day brought laughter, sunlight, and the healing rhythm of ordinary life. Clara noticed how her children's eyes sparkled again, their cheeks plump with health, and her own heart began to open to joy, hope, and gratitude. One evening, Thomas found Clara on the porch, watching the sunset with a thoughtful gaze. "You've been quiet," he said softly. She smiled almost shyly. I never thought I could feel safe or happy again." Thomas took her hand gently. "You deserve more than survival. You deserve a life full of warmth, laughter, and love, and I promise I'll give it to you." Clara's eyes filled with tears, not from fear but from relief and recognition of a profound kindness. She had been broken, dragged through the cold streets, abandoned by fate, but now a new chapter was unfolding. Thomas' unwavering protection had given her more than shelter. It had rekindled her faith in humanity, her trust in others, and her hope for a future she thought was lost. The following week, Thomas organized a small ceremony by the ranch fire for the twins. Clara's eyes glistened as she watched their joy, each laugh a victory over the pain of the past. Thomas promised to care for them as his own, to provide safety, guidance, and love. It wasn't just a promise, it was a covenant of protection, a declaration that their suffering had ended, and that life would now be nurtured, not feared. One evening, as snow began to fall gently outside, Thomas led Clara to the porch. "I have one more question," he said. Her heart raced. "Will you stay with me? Not just for safety, but for us?" Clara felt her breath hitch. The memory of nights dragged through snow and fear flashed in her mind. She realized how much she had come to rely on his strength, and yet how much her heart longed for partnership, trust, and love. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, I will stay," she whispered. The twins squealed in delight, hugging her legs, while Thomas' hand wrapped around hers. That moment marked a turning point, not just safety, but the beginning of a family, a home, and a shared life. The cold Montana air seemed warmer now, carrying the promise of hope, love, and renewal. Over the next months, the ranch thrived with laughter, love, and warmth. Clara and Thomas worked side by side, teaching the twins, preparing meals, and sharing quiet moments by the fireplace. The children flourished under their care, learning, playing, and experiencing joy they had never known. Clara's heart healed alongside her children's spirits, filling the once barren landscape of their lives with hope. The day came when Thomas officially adopted the twins, and Clara's name was legally restored as their guardian. The small ceremony by the ranch included neighbors, friends, and the sheriff who had once intervened. Every smile, every hug, every word spoken reaffirmed that justice, love, and protection had triumphed. Clara, Thomas, and the children finally felt truly home, safe, cherished, and whole. As the sun set behind snow-dusted mountains, Clara sat on the porch with Thomas beside her. The twins played nearby, laughter echoing through the valley. Clara whispered softly, "You saved us, not just our lives, but our hearts." Thomas held her hand, gazing at her with warmth and tenderness. "And you gave me a family," he said. Together they watched the sun dip below the horizon, a perfect ending to their journey from fear to love, from despair to hope.